Welcome to a special edition of the Digital DJ Tips podcast. And this is all about vinyl. It's all about me playing my first vinyl gig in 22 years. And that's quite a big thing for someone who founded and runs the biggest digital DJing school in the world, right? What on earth am I doing going back to vinyl? I will reveal all. And the reason we're putting this into a podcast is so many people have fed back on the social media posts, especially that we made around this thing that I did last week. So I should really tell you about what the thing is, why I did it, and then we'll dive into where it's going to go next, and I'll answer hopefully some of the questions that lots of people have had about my first vinyl gig in 22 years. Right, so what's it all about then? I decided maybe a year ago that I really wanted to assemble a collection of 7-inch singles of old-fashioned 45s, start collecting some of the tracks that really matter to me and that have mattered to me all the way through my life. Call it a midlife crisis, call it a legacy thing, who knows? But I decided I wanted to do that. I started DJing on 7-inch vinyl many years ago. My first DJ gear wasn't a pair of Technics and a mixer at all. It was a carpeted plywood box with 2 turntables that didn't have speed controls and a very rudimentary way of switching between them, a cassette deck built in as well, and a box with some frosted glass like the type you get in a bathroom so people can't look in at you, with a flashing coloured set of lights behind it. In other words, a classic 1980s mobile disco setup. And so my early DJing was all kind of done on 7-inch singles with exactly the kind of setup I'm talking about now. And I kind of wanted to return to that just for a fun thing to do. But as I kind of developed the idea, I realized that I didn't want to just go and buy an old-fashioned mobile disco setup. That actually it was about education for me. I wanted to educate not only the audience here at Digital DJ Tips, who we teach, of course, we're a big DJ school, but also the people who might attend any gig that I played on this system, teach them about what I believe DJing at its essence is about, which is getting the music in the right order. And so in some ways, what I wanted to assemble was old-fashioned. It was like that old-fashioned gear. I wanted turntables that didn't have speed controls and didn't have anything that would distract you from just playing the music. In other ways, it was quite modern because one of the things I wanted to do, or two of the things I wanted to do, one, I wanted it to be completely portable so I could take it anywhere, literally take it up a hill, play at a field, throw it in the back of the car and play anywhere that I can live stream. So that brings me on to the second thing that I wanted it to be able to do. While I wanted the DJ gear and the way of playing music, old-fashioned 45s, to be very traditional, I actually wanted to be able to do some of the great things that you can do with modern tech. So I wanted to be able to, as I just mentioned, potentially live stream what I was doing. And connected to that, I wanted to be able to have a camera over the decks that if I was in a venue, I could project onto the screen, or I could plug into their big screens there with an HDMI cable and therefore show people what I was doing. So they could not only see a DJ in the corner or whatever, but around them on screens, they could see old-fashioned record decks and records being put on and queued up and played. So this was my idea, kind of wireless. Oh, and wireless as well, by the way. So the idea again was that the speakers wouldn't be connected to the actual DJ gear. So I wouldn't have to worry about draping cables everywhere. So again, using some of the modern things that have appeared recently in the DJ world, like very low latency wireless. So you don't need to have cables between your speakers and your gear. This was my mad idea, right? So I started looking into it and I realized that the choices of gear are very limited indeed. And luckily through contacts in the industry, I found that one of the old, like real classic turntables that vinyl enthusiasts used to carry around with them, to record fairs and so on, just so they could listen to stuff before they bought it, had been remade and remanufactured by a company called SKAA in Tokyo, in Japan. And it was the old Columbia deck, the old battery-powered decks from Columbia. And they also decided that they would make a similar looking, feeling DJ mixer that was utterly basic, with 2 channels, a crossfader, and all these units have got little speakers built in, but they've also got headphone sockets, so you could plug them all together, and there's also an output on the mixer, so you could then send that off to your decks. And I've actually got photos of this. So if you're interested in looking at the setup, go to digitaldjtips.com and have a look at the article I wrote about this over there. But more on that later, because once I'd realized these decks and mixer combo was available, I had to find it. Now, they only made it for the US market, and so I managed to get some delivered at no small expense, I have to say. And I was good to go. Now, they came with a US adapter, and I didn't bother buying any kind of mains cables to plug it into the wall because, as I said, it was all about doing it in a portable way. So they use those big old-fashioned cylinder batteries, not the AAs or the AAAs, but the old D batteries. And they used 6 each. So I had to go and buy some batteries. I bought the rechargeable ones. Then I had to find chargers. Now you can't find chargers for these batteries that can take, 18 of them for 2 decks and a mixer. The most I could find was one that would take 8, I think. So I had to buy 2 of these chargers, and it still takes 2 goes to charge them all up. These are all the kind of things that I was faced with when I was trying to set up this equipment. I already had a DJ stand. UDG gave us a folding stand many years ago, which we reviewed and we've still got, which was really nice. It's like a stand that's very neat, and it folds up and it's on wheels. But I did have to get a flight case made. I found a flight case company and ordered a case. It wasn't very expensive actually. And they cut out all the foam inserts. I drew very careful pictures and sent them to them with measurements, and they cut out all the foam inserts so I could have it all set up. And these decks do play 12 inches. They do play vinyl LPs and albums and so on. But in that instance, I thought, well, I better make sure that I can play 12 inches if I want, which meant I had to get the decks raised properly within the case so that the edge of the record, which hangs over the edge of the turntables, because the turntables are so small, kind of poked out of the case as well and worked. Anyway, I got all this sorted. However, I don't play 12 inches on it. I only play 7-inch singles on it, but I did want to get that right. So at this point, I had some very rudimentary decks, all battery powered, in a nice case, all in a proper hard case, and they were sat on a stand. And then I had to think about the speakers. And so luckily, I'm friends with some people who make a system called SKAA, SKAA. And SKAA is a transmitter, and it can transmit to speakers that have been made to work with this protocol. And it transmits audio pretty much without any latency. There's a tiny, tiny bit, but you can live with it. And so I got them to advise me on this. We got a SKAA transmitter, which again, you can charge up. It lasts many, many, many hours. Just so I plugged that into the output of the DJ gear. And then we got a subwoofer and a top end speaker with a pole between them, which is what I'm using to kind of get started with this system. But the beauty is that I can have that anywhere with no wires connecting it to the DJ gear. So now I had battery powered speakers, because the speakers I'm using that work with this system are big and they're loud, but they also have rechargeable batteries. I had a battery powered complete system, including a transmitter to talk to the speakers, which is what I was looking for. Then I had to start practicing on this stuff. Now, practicing on it involved having records. I didn't have any records. I literally didn't have any. So at this point, I'm thinking, well, I need to start like writing down every time I hear something that is from the heyday of vinyl. So, anything from the 50s up to about the mid 90s, I would say. It was hard to find stuff on a 7-inch past that point. I would write down or Shazam and then start looking for, which opened a whole new, honestly, world to me that I didn't know existed. And that world can be summed up in one word: Discogs. Now, if you don't know Discogs, it's a place where people list, buy and sell physical music. So CDs, 12 inches, albums, 7 inches and so on. And it's an amazing site. It's like the eBay of music. Really amazing site. I could do you a whole podcast on just the best way to use Discogs, which I learned quickly. But I ended up spending a lot of time on there. You can have a want list on there in order to be told when you find a dealer or something what they've got in their collection that you want. And it's a great way of not only buying, but cataloguing if you really want to, the music you own. I didn't bother with any of the cataloguing stuff, but I did use it to start assembling a collection of 7 inches. But then, serendipitously, something happened that really helped me. I got a phone call when I was on holiday last summer from a friend where I live in Gibraltar. And my friend said, I've just spotted on Facebook Marketplace thousands and thousands of 7-inch singles for sale. Do you want to buy them? And I was like, yeah. So I looked at the listing. It was someone who lived around the corner from me, and I got my friend to go and get them, basically sent the money over, and he got these 7 inches. And when I got back home after the summer holiday, I realized that they were all from our local radio station that had gone digital several, years ago. And they'd had them sat in a storeroom and they just wanted to get rid of them. So someone had obviously been at them first, because it certainly wasn't the whole of their collection, but there was enough in this huge collection of thousands and thousands of records for me to extract a couple of hundred real classics. So I felt like with that and with my work on Discogs, I was ready to go. I've got about 300 singles to date for this endeavor. And I felt like I was kind of ready to go. I needed to practice now. I'd got the music, I'd got the setup, and it was time to start practicing. And practicing was the next step in realizing that things really did feel very different back in the day. Trust me, not only because I was back on vinyl, but also because it was very rudimentary. The decks were very, very basic. The mixers are ridiculously basic. I mean, you can literally just move from one song to another and that's it. There's no gain controls, there's no EQs, it really is utterly rudimentary. The thing that really made me smile about the mixer was, and with apologies to you if you're not a DJ, because this won't mean anything to you, but when you plug the headphones in, there's no cue buttons on the mixer. So how do you tell it which deck you want to listen to? Well, it sends the left-hand deck through the left-hand earpiece and the right-hand deck through the right-hand earpiece. And you think about that and you think, you know what? That kind of makes sense. And it does, in the spirit of keeping it all very simple. So I played a couple of little sets at home, cleaned the records, because a lot of them were very old and dirty, made a spreadsheet of them. I did make a spreadsheet listing the artist and the title and so on of the tracks, because a lot of the time there were tracks on the B-sides of these records I quite liked. And I also bought some of those white replacement sleeves, because a lot of the sleeves were so battered. I've kind of kept the picture sleeves because I think it's a shame to throw them away, but I've put a lot of the music into like proper, durable, modern sleeves that are fit for purpose. And so spent a bit of time giving some TLC to this music collection and found myself in the position of looking around for a place to test all this gear. And so the next job was to talk to my kind of contacts here where I live in Gibraltar. Now I know people as a DJ tutor and as someone who has been involved in the music scene here. So I had a chat with a couple of people and found a bar that is very close to my home. Lovely bar. It's got a terrace. It looks out over the yacht harbour and the marina. So it's got the waters lapping up to its edge. And it's also got big screens to plug into. Nice sound system already, so I didn't actually have to take my speakers down for a test. But more excitingly, the owner of the bar is a local promoter and he promotes all kinds of things. And one of the things that he's promoting this year is a concert called Back to the Classics. Now, Back to the Classics is on its third iteration and it's become very popular here in Gibraltar. What he does is get the best local musicians to kind of assemble into bands to play classic hits from the 70s up to the noughties. And so the playlists, and they have kind of 3 extended sets every time they do one of these. The playlists are just packed full of classic songs that you want to hear live from the biggest bands in the world, and they just play cover versions. Hugely popular, as I say. But they've had a DJ sat there with a laptop just doing what laptop DJs do between the bands in the past. So I said to him, come on, we can do better than this. Why don't we have a old school vinyl DJ with what's being done projected onto the huge screens in the festival arena, so everyone can see, they're hearing the classic songs and they're seeing a DJ playing songs from the same era and they're understanding that it's all retro, it's all back to the classics. And he loved the idea, but he said, Phil, I don't want to be funny, I've never heard you play and I don't know your music and it's all talk. So we thought we'd kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and I'd head down to his venue in order to have a test gig. And that's kind of where we're at. I did it last Friday at the time of recording this podcast. So how did it go? Well, the first thing I can tell you is it took about 5 seconds to get back into it. Considering I haven't played on vinyl in 22 years and I don't play many DJ gigs anymore, because I truly believe a DJ should be practicing every week and playing regularly in order to be good. So I don't want to pretend I'm doing those things. I'm too busy teaching. So look, this was a big deal to me to get on a stage in front of a packed bar at 7 in the evening as people are coming out for their night. But 5 seconds. As soon as I played that first song, got the volume right, had a little wander around the front of the speakers to check it all felt cool and felt like I wanted it to. And then I went back to the decks and thought, what am I going to play next? I was good. I was off, because DJing is about what am I going to play next, repeated every 2 to 3 minutes until the end of your set, right? So that's the first thing. And before I knew it, I was kind of swaying away behind the decks, which is what I like to do. And I did find it was kind of illuminating, but also highly nostalgic. It was illuminating in that I was remembering things that I'd forgotten completely about DJing on vinyl. One of them was that you don't know the BPM of the songs. So I was playing, I thinking, oh, I'll pull out that chilled out lounge type song that I love, that lovely to hear at sunset as the sun was going down behind me. You know what I mean? And it turned out it was quite a banging house song. It had quite a big bass line and the tempo was about 125. And I'm like, no, that's a little bit too much for now. That's not what I was looking for. And it happened a couple of times. So I will be going through and figuring out the BPMs and adding them to the labels of the covers of all those tracks, a little sticker with the BPM written on it, so that I can just make sure that I don't make any mistakes like that. I didn't take any spare needles, and that really irked me, really worried me, because of course if there's a problem with one of the needles on one of the record decks, you can't play anymore, and you should always have spare needles to plug in should that happen. So even though I didn't need them, I was kind of like, well, that was a kind of rookie error. I wish I hadn't done that. The biggest mistake, I think, that I made, and the gig went really, really well, by the way. The gig was, the owner within about 5 minutes was within the first 2 or 3 songs, was stood beside me, filming it on his phone and saying, show me a transition, I'm going to share it on my Instagram. But more importantly, we were talking about music. We went into kind of reggae 20 minutes where we played some songs that he'd not heard for a while and so on. The regulars were coming up and wondering what I was doing and talking to me about the projections on the screen. So all the things I was wanting to happen were happening. So it did go down well. But the biggest issue, and luckily this was something that by mistake we'd fixed before the gig even started, was that I didn't have any EQ. I didn't have any way of adjusting the bass and treble of the playing songs. Now, when you are DJing, one of the things that modern digital DJs obsess about is having all their tracks at the same loud volume and all their tracks sounding great as soon as they hit play. And it's almost like they're scared to touch their mixer. If a track's quiet, turn it up. If a track sounds a little bit dull, turn the treble up a little bit. If it's too boomy, turn the bass down, etc, etc. Now, as vinyl DJs, we knew that instinctively. If you were playing back in the mixing days, back in my days of being a club DJ on vinyl, you were playing a really strong, loud imprint, something like maybe Strictly Rhythm from New York with one of their house songs. Now, they were loud and they were well pressed, and you'd get 5 minutes worth of music on one side of a 12-inch, and the grooves were deep and they just sounded awesome. If you then switch to, an electro compilation or something that had 10 songs on every side, you'd be lucky if it would even track, because the bass had probably jumped the needle out of the record. But even if it did, it'd be half the volume, and the audio quality would be terrible compared to the 12-inch. So you'd be doing the very best you could with the mixer's gain and EQ controls to just get them sounding there or thereabouts. And it's a skill that seems to have been lost by DJs who are just too scared to touch their mixers, right? So luckily for me, even though the mixer I had literally only had volume, so I could have just about got the volumes right between all these 7 inches of varying quality. Some were worn out, some were reasonably new, some were obviously from 20 years ago and some were from 50 years ago. So the audio quality did vary. So I could have just played with the volume, but luckily, when we were setting up in this venue, we decided that we would go through a second mixer just because it was easier to then plug it into the venue's speakers from there. And the second mixer had EQ. It had a bass and a treble, a low and a high EQ. So when I was playing really worn out old vinyl, I could at least try and put a little bit of fizz back into it with these EQ controls. And I really missed that. So that's something I've got to fix, because I don't really want to strip it back so far that I've got no control over the EQ at all. So this is a work in progress, because you try finding a DJ mixer that works on batteries. I think I own the only one that exists. So yeah, that's one thing I've definitely got to work on. But the gig went really, really well. And the biggest point is I just thoroughly enjoyed it, and the audience enjoyed it, and the person for whom I played enjoyed it, who's running the big gig that we're going to be playing at later on this summer. That is the one that I'm really excited about. It's not going to be me standing up there trying to wow the audience with songs they've never heard or any of that stuff. They've come to hear stuff they love. I'm going to sit down with the promoters. We're going to choose a playlist. At least we're going to choose a load of songs that we think would work. And then maybe I'll have a bit of leeway as to which ones I end up playing. But the thing that's really exciting for me is showing people real DJing on real decks with no tricks, with nothing hidden. Because the trouble with modern DJing, the trouble with mashups live and with stems and with effects and samplers and loops and all that kind of thing, they're great. But often the audience doesn't have a clue what the DJ is doing, and there's a disconnect there, you lose something. So what I'm hoping to learn from this is what you gain by showing people exactly what you're doing. And in this case, it's explicit because it's like almost watching a boiler room while it's happening because of the cameras over the gear. And I'm hoping to bring that back into the way that we teach digital DJing at Digital DJ Tips, to try and bring back a little bit of don't only do stuff, but make sure the people you're playing to know what you're doing a little bit more, because I think that will bring a bit of dynamism back to digital DJing. You know, I certainly don't advise anyone to get into what I've just described. It's like a business person buying a football team, right? As a vanity project. You're never going to make any money out of it. You're going to sink funds into it, and it will probably end up going in a direction you never wanted. All those things are probably true of this project. I'm doing it purely for fun, for passion. I'm doing it because of my kind of unique place as a DJ tutor, and it scratches an itch that I've got. It kind of balances out my day job with something that, you know, my day job is about knowing everything that's happening in the modern world of DJing, cutting edge, early adopter stuff, helping people understand all the new stuff. And it's kicking back from that, really. It's kicking against that to go in the other direction. Vinyl DJing is definitely having a resurgence. There's no doubt about that. It's one of those cool things alongside analog cameras and film and all that stuff. It's just a Gen Z thing where it's all about, hey, let's get back to being authentic and that. And I'm totally for that, but I don't think that it's going to become anything more than that. It's just a fad. And I collect vinyl. I collect records and albums, and I still have a hi-fi turntable and all that. But when it comes to DJing, I think we've probably moved past that in the vast majority of circumstances now. But there are things to be learned from the old ways of doing it. And so it's good to be involved in this again. There'll probably be a part 2 of this special podcast. I hope it hasn't been too boring for those of you who are strictly digital, and our usual service will be resumed very shortly. However, as I say, I've got a big gig to play on this remarkable, tiny, battery-powered, quite unique setup that I've kind of concocted. And it's not going to be in a bar with 100 people in it. It's going to be in front of several thousand in an outdoor venue where there's a lot more going on than just me. So I can't wait for that, and I can't wait to share what happens at that gig with you. But for now, this has been a special edition of the Digital DJ Tips podcast, going back to vinyl, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I'll see you very soon. Until next time, get good, get out there, and make the moments. Bye-bye for now.